Good morning. So as we continue now, the Ein Yaakov brings in a piece. Now, actually, in the Gemara and in the Ein Yaakov, this piece is prefaced with the word masiv. Masiv always indicates something that's being brought in as either a proof or a disproof of something that was previously stated in the Gemara. In this case, the Ein Yaakov doesn't show it to us in the context of why the Gemara brought in this proof. I guess the Ein Yaakov just felt that the content of this proof qualified as Agada, that's why he brought it in. And in this particular case, unlike what I've done other times, I'm not going to explain how this fits into the context of the Gemara. We'll just see this statement in its own right. So Rav Sheshes has brought in the following. The pasuk says, speaking about the menorah that stood in this case in the Mishkan, but it was the same thing in the Bais HaMikdosh, michutz leparochas ha'edus ya'aroch, that the menorah should be arranged outside of the parochas. So in the Mishkan, or in the Bais HaMikdosh, in the Kodesh, in the sanctuary, there was a tapestry. There were at times it was an actual wall, but for most of the time it was a tapestry hung down between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, between the Holy and the Holy of Holies. Now, in the area that's just called Holy, which is outside the paroches, outside the tapestry, that's where the menorah was meant to be arranged. So now the Gemara questions, why is it that it was necessary to have a menorah in the Bais HaMikdosh? V'chi la'ora hitzarich? Did the Bais HaMikdosh need light? V'alo kol arba'im shana sha'olchu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, for all 40 years that the Jews traveled in the desert, Loholchu ela la'oro. They only traveled to the light that was provided by God. So if Hashem could provide light for an entire nation, surely Hashem could create light within the Bais HaMikdosh. So the reason for lighting the menorah cannot possibly have been because otherwise the room would have been dark. Now also, and this is kind of unstated, but the pasuk referred to the tapestry as the paroches ha'edus, the tapestry of testimony. Now, on a pshat level understanding, the reason why it's called the paroches ha'edus is because on the other side of the paroches, on the other side of the tapestry, were the luchos ha'edus, were the two tablets sitting in the Aron and the Ark, and they were the tablets of testimony. However, the Gemara understands that if the pasuk used the word testimony while it was discussing the menorah, then it didn't just mean that the paroches was dividing from the luchos ha'edus, but it also meant to indicate in some way that the menorah was also considered to be testimony. Ele'edus hu lebo'e olam. The menorah was testimony to all of those who are in the world, sha'ashchina shora b'Yisrael, that God's presence rests in Israel. To which the Gemara asks, my edus, how is it testimony? Amar Rav zu ner ma'aravi. Rav explained that this is the western candle. Shenosein ba shemen kimidas chavroseha, that candle had the same amount of oil as the other candles. Umimena haya madlik, that was the first one that was lit at night. And then in the morning when they would come, they would find that all the other candles had gone out. And before relighting all the candles, the only one that would remain lit was this western candle. And before lighting all the other candles, the Kohen would clean all the other ones. And then he would come to this one that was still burning. And that was a miracle. I know we always think about the miracle of the candles burning for 8 days by the Hanukkah time, but in actuality, every single day, a miracle occurred in the Bais HaMikdosh that even though there was not enough oil placed in the menorah for that one candle to burn all the way through the next day, it did. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Further, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Kol hashmanim yafin lidyoy. All types of oil are good for ink. V'shemen zayis, but olive oil min hamufchar is best for ink. So to understand this, nowadays, what do we know about ink? We buy pens with ink, or we go to a store and buy ink. And as you'll see in a minute, we're talking specifically about ink being used for a Sefer Torah. And Rashi explains as follows, that part of the process of making ink was they would take a glass vessel and they would boil oil underneath it until the glass vessel itself ended up becoming black from the soot rising up from the burning oil. And then they would scrape off that black soot from the glass, and they would mix it up together with a little bit of oil again. And after it dried out, that was used as one of the ingredients in the ink in order to darken it. So there were 2 steps in the creation of ink which required oil. First was the oil that was being boiled in order to create that soot, or possibly was burnt. It's not really clear. And secondly, it was the oil that was subsequently mixed into the soot. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had said all types of oil are good for ink, but olive oil is the best. So for which one of these 2 steps is he referring to? Ibaylu. The Gemara posed the question, legabel o la'ashen? Was he saying olive oil is the best to mix in with the oil soot? Or did he mean olive oil was the best oil to create the soot to begin with? So Tashma, the Gemara brings in a brisa to try to determine an answer to this question. The Tani Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra learned, Kol hashmanim yafin lidyoy, that all types of oil are good for ink. V'shemen zayis min hamufchar, and olive oil is the best. Bein legabel, bein la'ashen, both when it comes to mixing into the soot, as well as when it comes to creating the soot to begin with. For either of those 2 purposes, olive oil is the best oil that you can use in order to create your ink. Now, the Bona, which is one of the commentaries on the Ein Yaakov, explains as follows, that just like olive oil is the best oil in order to create the light that's burning in the Bais HaMikdosh in the Menorah that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, as well as when it comes to the candles for Hanukkah, so too it's the best in order to shine the light of Torah in a Sefer Torah or other Sfarim of the Nevi'im. Because Ner Mitzvah V'Torah Or, when the Torah is called light, and therefore we'd like to have the best light possible namely olive oil light, in order to create the light that emanates from the Torah. And then the Gemara goes on, Amar Rav Huna, Kol hasrafim yafin l'dyai. Another one of the ingredients which they would put into the ink would be sap. And he says all the different types of sap are good for ink. V'sraf ktaf, but balsam sap, yafa mikulam, is the best of all. Rav Kook has a couple of comments on this. First of all, on the olive oil aspect of things, he says that in the Gemara we find in other places that oil is a metaphor for wisdom. And the purpose of ink, and the reason why God gave us the ability to write and to publish books, isn't to be writing books full of nonsense, but rather books that are full of wisdom, full of science, and that help establish the world on a good path, both spiritually as well as to have good government. So he says that therefore all types of oil are good for ink, because oil represents wisdom, and therefore any type of wisdom that can be put down on paper is all good. But the epitome of wisdom, which is the Torah, that should have the epitome of oil, and that's why the ingredients that are derived from olive oil should be used for the ink for a Sefer Torah. When it comes to sap, so Rav Kook makes a very interesting and a bit of a biting point. He says that oftentimes people write works that are really not on the area of their specialty. And the result is that even though they may bring down a lot of facts, which are actually valuable and interesting, but when it comes to their conclusions and their insights into the material they're discussing, it's often very lacking or very mistaken. And the reason for that is that because since they have not really devoted their whole focus and life to understanding this particular area, so they are not sufficiently involved in this to truly understand it at its depth. So he says that when it comes to most types of trees, it's the fruit of the tree which is the most important and significant part of the tree. The sap is only secondary. It's a byproduct of whatever else the tree is producing. So therefore, even though you can go ahead and produce a book using sap from another tree, but it's not going to be the best because it's a secondary sap, similar to the authors who are writing about their secondary material. But he says the ktaf is a type of tree whose only produce is the sap, similar to someone who's writing a book about something which that is his full focus of his studies. That's going to end up turning out the best. Thank you very much for listening. Once again, the Shirim Ein Yaakov are sponsored Le'ilu Nishmas Chana Devora Bas Avram. And if you'd like to also sponsor these Shirim or other ones, please be in touch with me. Have a great day.